Morgan Reed had always known this day would come, but she'd never expected it during fourth period calculus. The first sign wasn't the flickering lights or the strange metallic taste in the air. It was the absolute silence that fell over the usually bustling halls of Riverside High. Morgan's hand instinctively touched the small pendant around her neck, a gift from her father before he disappeared 3 years ago. The crystal inside pulsed with a faint blue glow, confirming her worst fears. "They're here," she whispered, her training kicking in as she scanned the classroom. 23 students, 1 substitute teacher, and exactly 12 seconds before the first wave would reach their floor. The aliens always started from the top, methodical in their approach. Mrs. Davidson was still droning on about derivatives when Morgan spotted the first shimmer, that telltale distortion in the air that marked active cloaking technology. She'd spent countless hours studying these patterns in the underground facility where her father had trained her, preparing her for this exact moment. "Get down," Morgan shouted, launching herself from her desk as the classroom windows imploded. Glass shattered inward as 3 crystalline figures materialized, their translucent bodies refracting light like living diamonds. The prismatic scouts had arrived, exactly as her father had predicted. The substitute teacher fainted on the spot, while students screamed and scrambled for cover. Morgan positioned herself between her classmates and the aliens, her pendant now glowing bright enough to cast shadows. The nearest scout turned its faceted head toward her, recognition flickering across its crystalline surface. Protocol 7 Alpha initiated. It transmitted in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. "Target acquired. Terminate all witnesses." Morgan's lips curved into a grim smile. "I don't think so." She'd pulled the pendant free, and it expanded into a plasma shield, its energy field humming with power. "Everyone behind me. Stay close to the walls." Jake Martinez, her lab partner and the only person who'd ever come close to discovering her secret, was already herding other students behind the shield. "Morgan, what the hell is going on?" Short version, she activated the shield's offensive capabilities, watching as it pulsed with stored energy. "I'm not really just a high school junior. Those aren't exchange students, and this definitely isn't a drill." The scouts moved with fluid grace, their crystalline bodies refracting deadly energy beams across the room. Morgan's shield absorbed each blast, but she could feel the strain building. She had to get everyone out before reinforcements arrived. "Jake, remember the maintenance tunnel we found during detention last month?" Morgan deflected another blast, this one strong enough to crack the blackboard behind her. "Get everyone there. The access panel's code is 7239-4. But what about you?" Jake's voice cracked with concern. "I'll be right behind you." Morgan reached into her boot and pulled out a small device her father had left her, a sonic disruptor designed specifically for prismatic entities. "I just need to give our uninvited guests a proper welcome." The lead scout stepped forward, its crystalline body pulsing with dangerous energy. "You cannot stop the convergence, child. This world will be harvested." Morgan's eyes narrowed as she adjusted the disruptor's frequency. "You know, that's exactly what Dad said you'd say." She pressed the activation button, watching as high-frequency waves rippled through the air. "He also told me your kind has a really bad habit of underestimating humans." The scouts' crystalline bodies began to vibrate, hairline fractures appearing across their surfaces. Morgan backed toward the door, maintaining the sonic assault while her classmates escaped. The aliens' forms started to splinter, their coherent energy fields destabilizing. "Jake, go, now." Morgan shouted, watching as he led the last of their classmates into the hallway. She had seconds before the scouts would adapt to the sonic frequency. They always did. But seconds were all she needed. The lead scout lunged forward, its partially fractured form still deadly. Morgan rolled under its attack, coming up beside the classroom's main support pillar. "You really should have done your homework," she said, planting a small charge device on the column. This school was built in 1962, terrible year for structural integrity. She dove through the doorway as the charge detonated, bringing down a section of ceiling onto the scouts. Their crystalline screams echoed through the hallway as Morgan sprinted after her classmates. She knew the debris wouldn't hold them for long, but it didn't need to. She just needed enough time to get everyone to safety and activate the school's hidden defense grid, assuming, of course, that her father had installed it like he promised. The real question was, how many more scouts were already inside the building, and what were they really after? Because if there was one thing Morgan had learned from her training, it was that aliens never sent just 3 scouts unless they were looking for something specific. And judging by the way her pendant was pulsing, that something was a lot closer than anyone realized. The maintenance tunnels beneath Riverside High smelled like decades of forgotten history and stale air. Morgan led her group through the narrow passageways, her pendant's blue glow casting eerie shadows on the concrete walls. Behind her, 17 terrified students huddled together, with Jake bringing up the rear. "We should be safe down here for now," Morgan said, pausing at an intersection. The scouts' crystalline structure makes it difficult for them to navigate narrow spaces. She didn't mention that this vulnerability was exactly why her father had insisted on building the school's emergency bunker in these tunnels. "Morgan," Jake's voice echoed off the walls. "I think it's time you told us what's really going on. Those things upstairs, they knew you." She pressed her hand against a seemingly ordinary section of wall, revealing a hidden scanner. "They didn't know me," she corrected, watching as green light traced her palm print. "They recognized what I am." The wall slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a room that looked more like a military command center than a school basement. Computer screens lined one wall, displaying real-time footage from cameras throughout the building. Another wall held an arsenal of weapons that would make any government agency jealous. "Welcome to Sanctuary Station," Morgan announced, ushering everyone inside. "My father's last gift to Riverside High." Tessa Rodriguez, captain of the debate team, stepped forward. "Your father, the one who disappeared during that research expedition." "He didn't disappear." Morgan activated the room's defense systems, watching as reinforced shutters sealed the entrance. "He went underground to protect us from them. The Prismatic Collective, a race of crystalline beings that harvest worlds for their energy." On the screens above, more scouts materialized in the school's hallways. Their movements were different now, more precise, more searching. Morgan's eyes narrowed as she watched them converge on specific locations. "They're looking for something," Jake observed, moving closer to the monitors. "Something in the school." Morgan nodded, pulling up an old file on one of the computers. 3 years ago, my father discovered that Riverside High was built on top of something ancient, something that didn't come from Earth. The screen displayed complex energy readings and excavation plans. He called it the resonance key. "A key to what?" someone asked from the back of the room. "To everything," Morgan replied, her voice grim. "According to my father's research, it's part of a network of devices left behind by an even older alien civilization. The Prismatics want it because it could give them access to unlimited energy, enough to harvest every planet in our galaxy." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. On the screens, more scouts entered the building, their crystalline bodies pulsing with increasingly aggressive energy patterns. "But why now?" Jake asked, studying the footage. "Why attack during school hours?" Morgan's fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up more documents. "Because they're running out of time. Look at these energy readings. They're spiking. The key is becoming active on its own." A deep rumble shook the foundations of the building, causing dust to rain down from the ceiling. The pendant around Morgan's neck pulsed violently, its blue light turning almost white. "That's not good," she muttered, checking the underground sensors. "The key's resonance frequency is increasing exponentially. If we don't find it before they do..." "Then what?" Tessa demanded. "Then it won't matter if we survive today," Morgan said, pulling up a weapons locker. "Because there won't be an Earth left to save tomorrow." She began distributing specialized equipment, sonic disruptors, shield generators, and communication devices. "I know this is a lot to take in, But right now we have two choices. Hide here and hope they don't find us, or fight back and save our world. Jake was the first to step forward, taking a disruptor. I'm in, but we'll need a plan. Morgan smiled, pressing a button that revealed a holographic map of the school's underground layout. Already got one. The key's energy signature is strongest near the old boiler room. But getting there won't be easy. The scouts will be converging on that location too. So we split up, Tessa suggested, surprising everyone by grabbing her own weapon. Create a diversion. Morgan nodded approvingly. Exactly. Jake, you and Tessa take Team 1 through the East Tunnel. Create as much noise as you can. The scouts can't resist investigating energy disturbances. My team will approach from the west. And when we find this key, someone asked. Morgan's expression darkened. We destroy it. It's the only way to ensure the prismatics can't use its power. My father left instructions, and a device specifically designed for that purpose. Another tremor shook the room, stronger this time. Warning lights began flashing across the computer screens as new energy signatures appeared. They're bringing in heavy artillery, Morgan announced, checking the readings. Harvesters. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they start tearing the school apart to get to the key. She looked around at the scared but determined faces of her classmates. These weren't trained operatives or soldiers. They were teenagers who, just an hour ago, had been worried about pop quizzes and prom dates. Now they were Earth's last line of defense. I know this isn't fair, she said softly. None of you asked for this fight, but right now, we're all that stands between them and the end of everything we know. So what's it going to be? The response came not in words, but in actions, as one by one, her classmates armed themselves and moved into position. Jake caught her eye and nodded, no words needed between old friends. Morgan checked her pendant's power levels one last time. All right, people, let's go save the world. As they moved out, she couldn't help but wonder if this was how her father had felt 3 years ago, knowing what was coming but unable to stop it. The only difference was, this time, humanity wasn't facing the threat alone. This time, they were ready to fight back. The old boiler room's access tunnel felt like the throat of some ancient beast, with pipes running along its walls like metal veins. Morgan led her team through the darkness, their footsteps echoing despite their best efforts to move quietly. Above them, the ceiling trembled with each impact as the harvesters tore through the school's upper levels. Energy signature is getting stronger, Morgan whispered, checking the handheld scanner her father had left behind. The device's needle was practically bouncing off the scale. The key must be close. Behind her, Sarah Chen, the quiet girl from AP Physics who had surprised everyone with her calm under pressure, spoke up. Morgan, look at these markings. She pointed her light at the tunnel wall, illuminating strange symbols etched into the concrete. They seemed to pulse faintly with an inner light. Morgan ran her fingers over the symbols, feeling a slight vibration. They're not just markings, they're warnings. She recognized them from her father's research files. The civilization that created the key left these as signposts. Warning about what? Sarah asked, adjusting her grip on her sonic disruptor. Before Morgan could answer, her communicator crackled to life. Jake's voice came through, tense but controlled. Morgan, we've got trouble. The diversion worked, maybe too well. At least 15 scouts are converging on our position. Fall back to checkpoint Beta, Morgan ordered. Don't try to engage that many at once. She checked her map, calculating quickly. We're almost at the target. Just keep them busy for 5 more minutes. Copy that, Jake responded. In the background, she could hear the distinctive sound of sonic weapons firing. Just hurry, okay? The transmission cut off as another tremor shook the tunnel, stronger than before. Dust and small debris rained down from above. The harvesters are getting closer, Sarah observed, glancing nervously at the ceiling. They must know we're down here. Morgan nodded grimly. They're not just looking for the key anymore. They're trying to box us in. She turned to address her team, which consisted of Sarah and 3 others. Listen up. What we're about to find, it's not going to be what you expect. No matter what happens, stay behind me and... She never finished the sentence. The tunnel wall beside them suddenly burst inward, crystalline forms emerging from the breach like living shards of glass. The scouts had found another way in. Contact! Morgan shouted, activating her shield as energy beams filled the narrow space. Sarah, the scanner, don't let them get it. Sarah clutched the device to her chest and scrambled backward as Morgan engaged the nearest scout. In the confined space, the alien's superior size worked against them, but they made up for it with sheer force. Morgan's shield crackled under the assault, its energy reserves depleting rapidly. "Run," she ordered her team. "Get to the boiler room. We'll hold them here." Sarah hesitated for just a moment before nodding and leading the others deeper into the tunnel. Morgan and one of her teammates, David, held their position, sonic disruptors firing continuously. "They're different from the ones upstairs," David noted between shots. "More aggressive." "Because we're getting close to what they want," Morgan replied, ducking under a crystalline blade that would have taken her head off. She countered with a point-blank sonic blast that shattered the scout's left arm. "They're desperate." Her communicator crackled again. This time it was Tessa's voice. "Morgan, we've got confirmation. The harvesters are directly above the boiler room. They're going to drill straight down." Morgan's mind raced. If the harvesters breach the boiler room before they reach the key... "New plan," she announced. "David, fall back to Sarah's position. I'll handle these." "But..." "That's an order." She pulled a small device from her belt, her last resort, something her father had warned her to use only in extreme circumstances. "Go, now." As David retreated, Morgan activated the device. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and the crystalline scouts froze, their bodies resonating at a frequency that made the very air shimmer. "You want the key so badly," she taunted, increasing the device's power. "Come and get it." The scouts charged forward just as Morgan threw the device at their feet and dove around the corner. The explosion that followed wasn't like anything conventional. Instead, it was an implosion of sound and light that collapsed that section of the tunnel, sealing it off. Morgan didn't wait to admire her handiwork. She sprinted toward the boiler room, her pendant pulsing faster with each step. When she finally burst through the heavy doors, she found her team staring at something that made her heart stop. The boiler room had been transformed. The mundane machinery had been pushed aside by some unseen force, revealing a chamber that seemed to exist somewhere between reality and dream. In the center, suspended in a column of light, floated a crystalline structure that looked almost like a snowflake, if snowflakes were made of living energy and contained what looked like entire galaxies within their patterns. "The resonance key," Morgan breathed, understanding for the first time why her father had been willing to sacrifice everything to protect it. "It's beautiful." "And it's dying," Sarah added, holding up the scanner. The readings were off the charts, but the pattern was clear. "These energy spikes, they're not activation signals. They're a distress call." Another impact rocked the chamber as the harvesters drew closer. They had minutes, maybe less. Morgan stepped toward the key, her pendant responding to its presence. "My father knew this would happen. That's why he trained me. The key isn't just a power source, it's alive, and it's chosen its next guardian." She reached out toward the floating crystal, understanding finally why it had called to her, why her father had disappeared, and what she needed to do next. The fate of not just Earth, but countless worlds, hung in the balance. And somewhere above them, the harvesters began their final descent. The moment Morgan's fingers touched the resonance key, the world exploded into light. Knowledge flooded her mind, images, sounds, and sensations from 1,000 different worlds. She saw civilizations rise and fall, watched as the prismatic collective consumed planet after planet, and finally understood why her father had chosen this moment to act. "Morgan." Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. "The harvesters, they're directly above us." Reality snapped back into focus. The key pulsed in Morgan's hands, its crystalline structure now intertwined with tendrils of energy that wrapped around her arms like living vines. Her pendant had merged with it, creating a network of light that spread across her skin. "Everyone out, now," she ordered, feeling the power building around her. "Get to the evacuation point." The ceiling groaned as massive drilling equipment began cutting through the layers of earth and concrete above them. Crystalline dust rained down as the harvester's energy fields interfered with the chamber's ancient technology. Her communicator crackled. "Morgan, we've got a problem." Jake's voice was strained. "They've got Tessa. The scouts ambushed us at checkpoint Beta. They're doing something to her." Morgan's blood ran cold. She'd seen the reports in her father's files about what happened to humans captured by the collective. Location: East Tunnel Junction. "But Morgan, there's too many of them. We need..." The transmission cut off as a massive crystalline tendril punched through the ceiling, showering everyone with debris. The harvester's probe was easily 20 feet across, its surface crackling with destructive energy. "Go," Morgan shouted to her team, pushing them toward the exit. "Get to Jake's position. Help Tessa." "What about you?" Sarah hesitated at the door, her eyes wide with concern. Morgan managed a grim smile as the key's power continued to flow into her. "I'm going to show these crystals exactly why they should have left Earth alone." As her team evacuated, more probes breached the chamber. The harvesters were attempting to surround the key, their crystalline technology designed to contain and extract it. What they hadn't counted on was the key choosing to fight back. Morgan raised her hands, and pure energy erupted from her palms, meeting the harvester's probes head-on. The collision of forces sent shockwaves through the chamber, cracking the walls and floor. She could feel the key guiding her, showing her how to channel its power. But even as she fought, her mind raced with worry about Tessa. The scouts wouldn't keep her alive for long. They'd either convert her into one of their crystalline proxies or worse. Time was running out. A new voice cut through her communicator, Tessa herself, but different, strained. "Morgan, they're in my head. The crystals, they're showing me things. Your father, he's..." "Hold on, Tessa." Morgan blasted another probe, her powers growing stronger as she adapted to the key's energy. "I'm coming." But the harvesters were relentless. For every probe she destroyed, 2 more emerged from the ceiling. They were trying to wear her down, and despite the key's power, it was working. She couldn't hold them off forever. That's when she heard it, a sound like breaking glass, but impossibly loud. The chamber's east wall shattered as a massive crystalline form emerged. Unlike the scouts or the harvesters, this entity radiated pure authority. Its faceted surface reflected Morgan's image 1,000 times over. "The key belongs to the collective," it spoke, its voice resonating through Morgan's bones. "Your resistance is pointless, child. Your father learned this truth too late." Morgan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you know about my father?" The crystal entity's surface rippled with what might have been amusement. "Would you like to see?" It raised one massive arm, and a holographic image appeared in the air between them. Morgan's breath caught in her throat. There, trapped within a crystalline prison, was her father. His body was partially transformed, crystal growths spreading across his skin, but his eyes were still human, and they were looking right at her. "Your choice is simple," the entity continued. "Surrender the key, and we will spare this facility and its occupants. Continue to resist, and we will harvest every living thing within these walls, starting with your friend Tessa." The key pulsed in Morgan's hands, sharing another vision. One of countless worlds saved, of the collective's advance finally halted. But at what cost? Her father, Tessa, everyone in the school. Could she sacrifice them all for the greater good? Her communicator crackled one last time. Jake's voice, desperate. "Morgan, whatever you're doing, hurry. Tessa's transformation is accelerating. We can't stop it." The chamber trembled as more harvesters positioned themselves above. The crystal entity waited, its massive form blocking her escape route. In her hands, the key continued to pulse, offering power, offering choice, offering destiny. But Morgan Reed wasn't just the key's chosen guardian. She was a daughter, a friend, and a protector. And sometimes, the hardest choices weren't between good and evil, but between impossible and unthinkable. She looked up at the entity, her decision made. "You want the key." Energy crackled around her as she accessed its deepest functions, protocols that even her father hadn't known about. "Come and take it." The chamber erupted in blinding light as Morgan initiated a sequence that would change everything. The real question wasn't whether she could save everyone, it was whether anything would remain to save at all. The key's activation sequence wasn't what anyone expected, not the prismatic entity, not the harvesters, and certainly not Morgan herself. Instead of the destructive burst she'd anticipated, the energy coursed through the chamber in precise geometric patterns, creating a complex network of light that seemed to bend reality itself. "What have you done?" The crystalline entity's voice carried an edge of fear, the first real emotion Morgan had heard from any of them. "Something my father understood, but you didn't," Morgan replied, watching as the key's energy continued to spread. "The key isn't a weapon or a power source, it's a bridge." The chamber walls began to shift, revealing ancient mechanisms that had laid dormant for millennia. The key's light touched each one, awakening systems that transformed the simple boiler room into something far more complex. "Morgan," Jake's voice cut through her communicator. "Tessa's transformation, it's stopping. The crystals, they're receding." A smile touched Morgan's lips. "That's because they're being called back." She turned to the entity, whose massive form was beginning to vibrate at an unusual frequency. "Your collective isn't as united as you thought, is it? There are others among you who remember what you used to be, what you were meant to be." The entity's surface rippled with distress as more of its crystalline mass began to resonate with the key's energy. "The convergence cannot be stopped. We have consumed 1,000 worlds." "And each one left an echo," Morgan interrupted, understanding flowing through her from the key. "Every planet, every species you harvested, their essence became part of you. Did you think they'd remain dormant forever?" Throughout the school, the scouts began to falter. Their perfectly coordinated movements became erratic as conflicting impulses fought within their crystalline forms. The harvester's probes withdrew from the ceiling, their energy signatures fluctuating wildly. Morgan's communicator came alive with reports from her scattered teams. The scouts were retreating, some of them literally falling apart as different frequencies battled within their structures. But she knew this was just the beginning. "Sarah," she called through the communicator, "I need you to get to my father. The prison they're keeping him in, it's connected to their network. When I give the signal, use your sonic disruptor at frequency Delta 7. "But that frequency would shatter any crystalline structure," Sarah protested. "It could kill him." "Trust me," Morgan replied, watching as the key's energy continued to rewrite the rules of the invasion. "Dad knew this might happen. It's why he left the frequency calculations in your physics textbook." The massive entity struggled to maintain its form, its voice becoming a chorus of different tones. "You cannot. We are eternal. The harvest must." "The harvest is over," Morgan declared, raising her hands. The key's power flowed through her in waves, each pulse carrying the memories and desires of countless consumed civilizations. "It's time for restoration." She reached out with the key's power, not to destroy but to unlock. Throughout the school, crystal structures began to transform. The scouts' perfect geometric forms dissolved, revealing the organic patterns that had existed before the collective's corruption. The harvester's devastating energy was redirected, turned inward to heal rather than consume. Jake's voice came through again, filled with awe. "Morgan, you need to see this. The scouts, they're changing. They're becoming beautiful." Through the key, Morgan could see it all. The crystalline beings weren't returning to their original forms. They were becoming something new, shaped by every world and species that had become part of them. The collective's rigid uniformity was giving way to diversity, to innovation, to life. But the entity before her wasn't surrendering without a fight. It launched a desperate attack, its remaining mass crystallizing the air itself as it tried to reach the key. Morgan stood her ground, remembering everything her father had taught her about standing up to impossible odds. "Sarah, now," she commanded. The sonic pulse that hit the entity was perfectly tuned, causing cascading fractures throughout its structure. But instead of shattering, it began to reform, its surface blooming with colors that had never existed in its crystalline state. "Morgan," a familiar voice emerged from the transforming entity. "The key, you understood." "Dad." Morgan's heart leaped as she recognized her father's voice, now merged with dozens of others, all the consciousnesses that had been trapped within the crystal prison. The entity that had been her father reached out with an appendage that was neither crystal nor flesh, but something in between. "The transformation, it's not just them. All of us, we're changing." Morgan nodded, tears streaming down her face as she maintained the key's energy flow. "I know, it's what you wanted, isn't it? Not to destroy them, but to remind them of what they lost, to give them back their souls." Through her communicator, she could hear the amazed voices of her classmates as they witnessed the transformation spreading throughout the school. The prismatic collective was becoming something entirely new, a synthesis of all they had consumed, but guided by compassion rather than hunger. But Morgan could feel the strain building. The key's power was immense, but channeling it through her human form was taking its toll. Sparks of energy crackled across her skin as she struggled to maintain control. "Morgan," her father's transformed voice carried concern. "The key's energy, it's too much for one person to contain. You have to let go." She gritted her teeth against the growing pain. "If I stop now, everything reverts. The collective, they'll go back to what they were." "No," her father said softly. "Some changes can't be undone. Some transformations are forever. Trust me. Trust them. Let go." The choice was no longer between saving Earth or saving her friends. It was about believing in the possibility of change, even in those who had seemed beyond redemption. Morgan looked at her father's transformed being, at the beauty emerging from what had been a force of destruction, and made her decision. The key's light flared one final time as she initiated the last phase of a plan set in motion years ago, by a father who had never stopped believing in the power of transformation. The chamber filled with radiance as the future itself hung in the balance. The light that filled the chamber wasn't just illumination, it was pure possibility, the combined potential of every civilization the collective had absorbed, now finally free to express itself. As Morgan released her hold on the key, its energy dispersed not in an explosion, but in waves of transformation that rippled outward like rings in a pond. "Everyone outside," she commanded through her communicator, her voice hoarse from effort. "Get to the football field. Now." The key lifted from her hands, floating in the center of the chamber. Its crystalline structure began to pulse with rhythmic waves of color, each one carrying the signature of a different world, a different species, a different dream of what might be. Her father's transformed being moved closer, its surface now a shifting canvas of organic patterns and living light. The resonance cascade has begun. The key is redistributing itself. Morgan stumbled, exhausted from channeling so much power, but strong arms caught her. Jake and Sarah had returned, with Tessa right behind them. Tessa's skin still bore fading traces of crystal, but her eyes were clear and human. "We need to move," Jake said urgently, supporting Morgan as they headed for the exit. "The whole place is changing." He wasn't exaggerating. The school's structure was transforming around them, walls flowing like liquid as the key's energy rewrote reality. The harsh fluorescent lights had been replaced by bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with gentle radiance. Even the air felt different, richer, more alive. They emerged onto the football field just as dawn broke over the horizon. The entire student body was there, watching in awe as that ordinary high school became something extraordinary. The building's form shifted and flowed, incorporating elements of crystal and organic matter in perfect harmony. The harvesters, once engines of destruction, had transformed into soaring crystalline spires that caught the morning light and broke it into countless colors. The scouts, no longer bound by rigid uniformity, had become beings of infinite variety, each one a unique fusion of all the worlds that lived within them. "It's beautiful," Tessa whispered, touching the fading crystal patterns on her arm. "I can still feel them. All the memories, all the lives. They were so lost, so hungry for connection. They forgot how to do anything but consume." Morgan's father emerged from the transformed school, his new form settling into something that balanced between human and crystalline. The key wasn't just a power source, he explained, his voice carrying echoes of 1,000 others. It was a reminder, a way to help them remember what they'd lost in their pursuit of perfection. "But what happens now?" Sarah asked, gesturing at the transformed landscape. "Everything's changed. How do we explain this?" Morgan smiled, feeling the last traces of the key's energy flowing through her veins. "We don't explain, we adapt, just like they did." She looked at the gathered students, seeing not fear but wonder in their eyes. The world's about to become a much more interesting place. Above them, the morning sky filled with shimmering lights as the transformed collective members took flight. But they weren't leaving. They were dancing, celebrating their liberation from the endless hunger that had driven them for so long. "They'll need guides," her father said, placing what passed for a hand on Morgan's shoulder. "Teachers to help them remember how to create instead of consume. And Earth will need protectors who understand both sides." Jake grinned. "Good thing we've got experience with impossible situations." Tessa flexed her arm, where the crystal patterns had formed into something like iridescent tattoos. "And some of us have a unique perspective on transformation." Morgan looked at her friends, at Jake's unwavering loyalty, Sarah's brilliant mind, Tessa's resilience, and all the others who had fought beside her. Then she looked at her father, transformed, but still somehow recognizably himself, still the man who had prepared her for this day. "The prismatic collective came looking for power," she said, watching as more transformed beings emerged from the school, each one unique, each one free. Instead, they found something better. They found their way home. The sun rose higher, its light catching the crystalline structures and creating rainbows that danced across a football field. In the distance, sirens wailed as the outside world began to react to the impossible changes taking place at Riverside High. But Morgan wasn't worried. The world was changing, yes, but change wasn't always something to fear. Sometimes it was exactly what everyone needed, a chance to become something more than they ever thought possible. Her pendant, now transformed into a living crystal that merged seamlessly with her skin, pulsed once more with familiar blue light. But now it wasn't warning of danger. It was welcoming a new dawn, a new way of being, a new chapter in the story of two species learning to grow together. "So," Jake said, nudging her shoulder, "think they'll still make us take finals after all this?" Morgan laughed, and the sound carried all the joy and relief and hope of victory. "Somehow," she said, watching as the transformed school shimmered in the morning light, "I think our curriculum is about to change." Above them, the dance of lights continued, a celebration of life and change and endless possibility. The war was over. The harvest had ended, and in its place, something new and wonderful was beginning to grow. It wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning of a much bigger one.